Dr. Jung is an award-winning researcher at UBCO. She's the principal investigator on over $10 million in research funding, so she's probably the most well-funded researcher at UBC Okanagan. And what's really cool is her primary program of research is a Made in Kelowna, Made at UBCO program. So you might have heard of Small Steps for Big Changes. She'll talk about that tonight. That actually started, some people in the audience I think might have been in, the original Small Steps for Big Changes study. 40 people were in that study. Then we did a larger study, or she did a larger study with 100 people. She expanded out to the YMCA in the community, then to 3 YMCAs, and Dr. Jung's program now is available in 3 countries, in 58 cities across Canada, Portugal, and Australia, all on research on how to prevent type 2 diabetes and promote lifestyle changes, which was all started here at UBCO with some of the people in the audience were the participants in some of those first studies. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Jung, and she's going to give a talk tonight on Move More, Live More, simple tips to keep exercise in your life.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And yes, like I would say my better half, but we'll see by the end of the night, I don't know. I've gotten to sit in the audience for all diabetes dialogues thus far, so I've got a big act to follow. But I am super proud to be working here in Kelowna on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Seal Okanagan Nation. And like Dr. Little said, it all started here, and I'm not remiss to acknowledge my unearned privilege to be on these lands. So I would like to start with a bit of active participation, including the MO crew. Hands up, so let's do it together. Have you ever set a New Year's resolution that you didn't stick to? Hands up. Okay, keep your hands up, please. And just take a quick right to left. Acknowledge, okay. Hands down. Ever on an exercise streak, you missed a few days, and then the few days kind of turn into a month, and then we just kind of forget about that. Have you ever had that experience before? Okay, just turn, look left and right. Okay, excellent. Have you ever said, I'm going to do this, and then don't even start? Yeah, this is me all the time. Okay, so please know that you are not alone, right? Dr. Little is like, just like you and me, there are times when the best intentions don't turn into action. And that's my job. I study health psychology, and that's what I'm really passionate about, is to really understand why, and then of course how to overcome those very, very common challenges that make us all human. So today I'm going to summarize a lot of research into what I believe are the 10 most potent strategies or tricks of the trade or tips that you can do to ensure that you are adherent or stick to exercise. So if I lose your attention, this is the list. So I don't, you can just take a picture and walk away. I am going to explain them in a really riveting manner, I assure you. But this is the this is the Coles notes, the quick and dirty. And I've ordered these actually in order of potency or most importance. And you know, I'm going to show you some of the evidence to show you or to try and convince you of that. But otherwise, you might have to take my word for some of these. But I'll see what I can do to convince you. So the first one, you might be surprised, is the state of mind of curiosity. And I'm going to attempt to summarize over 50 years of empirical research in psychology to demonstrate why this is tip number one. Really pretty important. And I'm also second generation Canadian. I'm very proud to have been born here. And so I like to highlight the doctors that are Canadian. So Dr. Latham, University of Toronto professor, long retired now, but what him and his other colleague, Dr. Locke, demonstrated is that if we want to achieve our goals, the ultimate, penultimate aspect is striving to seek our behaviors, getting that reward of achieving something that you really desired for. It's quite methodical. We can really do this, and so I'm going to ask you to orient your eyes to your right-hand side of this figure, summarizing this research. So your satisfaction with performance, this is your goal achievement, okay? And so if we want that, we look straight up from that. As soon as we are satisfied with achieving our goal, it automatically, for the human brain, increases our desire to commit to another goal. Which is kind of funny, but this is, if you've ever met somebody and they said, yeah, like I signed up for a 5K walk, or I did this, and then the next thing you know, as soon as they finish it, they're signing up for the next thing, They engage in pickleball and they do their tournament, and the next thing you know, they're up for another pickleball tournament. This is because we have that sensation of reward. So we goal achieve, that increases automatically our desire and willingness to engage in another goal-setting behavior. And it's moderated by a few things. So that means once we achieve that first goal, we set another goal, we are even more committed to striving towards that next goal. The other thing that does is it increases the importance of the goal. So it increases the value that we place on doing goal-directed behavior and achieving the goal. So that's important for us. Then, of course, it starts setting this loop where the more value we place on the goal, the more we're likely to input effort to do the goal, the more likely we're to achieve the goal, and then, of course, then we set another goal. The other thing it does is it increases our self-efficacy. And I'm going to hold here for a moment because self-efficacy is so important. You're going to see it 3 more times in this talk. Self-efficacy is a fancy word for saying task-specific confidence. So when we relate this to exercise behavior, this is like the difference between saying, yes, I'm confident I can exercise, to I am confident that I can walk 5 kilometers in that race on Saturday in 40 minutes or less. It's that confidence that I will go out every night after dinner, no matter if it rains in May in Kelowna, which is every single day. It also increases the receptivity to negative feedback when we're engaging in behavior and if things don't go our way. We have a more open mindset to it. And lastly, it increases our desire to create complex goals. So goals that are a little bit more challenging. So this nonstop feedback loop, all positive. It's a good thing. If we achieve a goal, then we're more likely to set other goals, and we're more likely to achieve success, etc. So now let's back up a little bit. If this is so good, we want to know what factors in to goal achievement or success or satisfaction with achieving a goal. So if you look on your left-hand side of this slide here, it says goal core. Okay, and so here's where the secret is in tip number 1 of curiosity. So if we want to achieve the exercise goals we set for ourselves, there's 2 big things that we need to do with our goals. They need to be specific and they need to be difficult. And we're often taught on social media kind of the opposite. And so I'd like to spend a minute here. Specificity is when you ask people, or we tell our children, just do your best. Just do the best you can. That does not work. So we know from decades of research that when we ask people to do their best, it's too vague. There's no reference. There's no external markers. It actually doesn't work as well as if we set a very specific goal. I will walk my first 5-kilometer race in June, no matter what the weather is. I will go for a post-dinner walk 5 days a week for the next 4 weeks straight. That kind of specificity. With the difficulty function, this is when we know that higher or harder to achieve goals actually increases our work effort into achieving them. So sometimes we feel like it's a little bit backwards there, but I'm here to assure you that actually having difficult goals is a good thing for your intrinsic motivation to achieve the goal. So the more, we don't want to create impossible goals, but we actually do want to set goals that we can't do today, but we know we can achieve over time if we put effort in. So now we're moving a little bit further into the mechanism. So how does this work? Well, the key piece to our goals is having choice. And this is where your curiosity and you come in. So we like to talk about choice a lot in my lab, where we give individuals the autonomy to self-set their own goals. And this is really cool research by Canadians, again, that demonstrated that self-set goals as compared to your personal trainer or a teacher or a parent or a child or Dr. Little, those goals are not going to stick with you as strong as if you set your own goals. So it's really, I think the biggest thing on this sheet to take away is that choice bit. You know you best. You set your goal. You know what's going to be difficult for you. You know what's going to be specific for you. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So summarizing what I just said, why you should believe me, that this is a big tip, is that self-setting goals are more influential on your long-term adherence to anything. Could be exercise, sleep, what have you. That autonomy is long-lasting, and yeah, it's because you know your body best. You know your limitations, your knee injuries, etc. best. So how we put this tip into action is we ask ourselves these 3 questions. What's going to work for me this month during the rainy May month? What am I willing to make changes with? And what motivates you? And so, like Dr. Little said, I get to work with individuals who may be at risk for type 2 diabetes, who have pre-diabetes, and we talk a lot about diet and exercise. And so some of those parameters are, I always use this example, and I was giving this example in Australia. I said, somebody said, you know, whatever you do, do not take away my nighttime jujubes, because they're my saving grace, and I just love it because it was so real, right? And we're like, nobody's touching the jujubes. So take away the cream in my coffee, the sugar in my coffee, whatever, but don't take the jujubes away. Anyways, I was giving this example in Australia, and literally 3 people put out their hand and were like, what are jujubes? So I was like, anyways, so point being, your choice, your decision, that's so powerful, right? Because nobody knows you better. Nobody can set a goal better than you can. Tip number 2, have self-compassion. All right, this one's also a Canadian from Quebec. And what Heather Sirois did was conduct a survey of over 400 adults from Canada, and she was trying to analyze what the key things are, because we find that for people who are naturally more self-compassionate with themselves, so they're kinder to themselves, they're less judgmental, they give themselves a breather, they are more likely to be active exercisers, sleep better, engage in health-promoting behaviors. And so anyways, it comes down to these 3 key aspects. When we are self-compassionate, we are more likely to be responsive to positive affect, so that gut reaction indicative of, yes, this feels good, so I will do more of. We're less influenced by negative affect, so those like gut reactions of shame, feelings of guilt that don't help us at all in life. And we're also more likely to have increased health self-efficacy. So you heard me say this before, self-efficacy is really, really critical. It's actually such a potent predictor of future behavior. And so if we are more compassionate with ourselves, we're more likely to be confident that we can engage in exercise behaviors, and lo and behold, then we do more exercise behavior. And so a couple of great Canadians, myself, my lab that I thought I should put out here, primarily because these participants were, we got to work with are from the Okanagan, and we did 2 studies. And essentially what we were trying to test is, does self-compassion as an intervention work? And so we conducted a 6-week long intervention, and each week we provided a self-compassion activity. So these would be things such as writing a letter to yourself, but writing it in the form of yourself is actually your best friend. So you can't do all that shoulding and negative talk that you do typically in between your 2 ears, but actually you're kind as you would be to your best friend. And so we were doing this activity, and we randomized people to receive the 6-week self-compassion intervention or a 6-week placebo intervention. So we talked about foot care, sleep, all good things, but nothing related to self-compassion. And what we found is that those who received the 6-week self-compassion intervention engaged in significantly more minutes of moderate and vigorous physical activity, which is great. And I could show you that data, but I actually, yes, want to show you the commentary more so, because I think it can be really moving if you can situate yourself, or perhaps you can relate to these types of statements. And so it was just beautiful to see. And these were individuals all with pre-diabetes, and the mean age was 60 years old. So how do we be more self-compassionate? Well, I would say, first, forget what's not working for you. Forget the past. We've all made mistakes. Everyone raised their hand when they said they hadn't done that thing or the New Year's resolution. That's called being human. So forget that. And know that you are actually one of humankind. You are much more common to everyone else in the room and everyone else outside these 4 walls, because you've experienced these setbacks. Not failures, but setbacks. Does anyone know how often or how many times it takes the average smoker to quit smoking for good? Just shout it out. 3? I heard 7. Any others? No. Who said 7? Who said 7? Yeah, it's right up front. A proud recipient of a Small Steps for Big Changes bento box for his salad that he's going to take. But you're right, 7, right? And we don't give smokers a hard time. It's incredible when somebody who's been smoking for a long time quits, but it doesn't take the first time, right? On average, it takes 7, which means that it takes lots of people 10 or 100, I heard, right? So we need to take that and apply that amount of kudos when we struggle with exercise behaviors or consistency. All right, so what works? What works is understanding what values you have right now. What is the motivating factor that you have a desire to be adherent to exercise? Maybe it's pain management, maybe it's playing with grandchildren or children, maybe it is chronic disease management. Whatever it is, find that place for you and then set realistic goals according to that. Goals can be demotivating, right? And that is our reminder that we want to make difficult but not unachievable goals that are set by somebody else. Oftentimes, the unachievable ones come from unrealistic expectations and unrealistic comparisons. So we know goal setting is good for us. I would encourage you to frame your goal on the behavior, not the outcome. So this is another common misinformation or a mistake that people tend to do. So what I mean by this is, as some people say, control the controllables. You can control how many nights a week you go for a post-dinner walk. You can control how long you walk in the rain or don't walk in the rain, but you can't control the number on the scale. So much of that is genetic, right? we can't control waist circumference, but we can control whether we go to the gym 3 times a week or 0 times a week. So we must focus on the things that we can control, because that's where our satisfaction, that's where the reward sensations are going to come in. And that's what we can have self-efficacy for. All right, moving on. I said it was going to come up a lot, and it's because it is so important. In my field, this is like the masterpiece. This is the core construct that is underrides it all, and that is self-efficacy. So I'm just going to take a moment to explain. I'm going to share with you the secrets of success here. There are 4 ways we can bolster self-efficacy or increase our confidence. And that task-specific confidence, you really want to have that. So thinking in your mind for a moment, what is the thing that what's the behavior that you want to engage in more of? So I was talking to Jake right before this, and he said he should be strength training more, but he doesn't. Okay, so let's pick on Jake for a moment here. Okay, so Jake is going to try and increase his strength training from 0 a week to 3 times a week. Okay, so Jake, we need to bolster your confidence to increase your ability to strength training, no matter what the weather is, no matter what happens at work, right? And so I would tell him there's 4 ways to do that. The biggest, most potent way to do that is through inactive masteries or mastery performance. So that first one up at the top top left is your experience of doing it in the past. So I would say to Jake, remember all the times you have strength trained in the past. That is your sole predictor, right? You know you've done it before, your body can handle it, you can do it again. The second most powerful way to increase his self-confidence is through vicarious experience. So when he sees Jocelyn, somebody he's very similar with, he sees Jonathan and he says, okay, well, if he can do it, so can I. We're the same body type, I've seen him, we know how to do this. We have the same knee injury, blah, blah, blah. That's going to be the second piece. Then the third is verbal persuasion. So this would be Barbara telling Jake, I know you can do it. Right? So somebody, let's say your spouse, a family member, a neighbor, somebody encouraging you can do it. And then the fourth and final one, least effective, but it's there, is those physiological cues. So when we start going for a walk, maybe we're starting to do something a little bit more intense than we've used to before, and our heart starts pumping. That's a sensation, a physiological feeling, felt arousal, that sometimes can elicit concerns. Maybe this isn't right, maybe my blood pressure's going too high. It's actually the sensation that tells you my heart's there and it's working, and it's good that my blood pressure is rising, this is feeling good. And so those are all sensations or cues to tell you that, hey, your body can do this, you can handle it, you've done it in the past, other people think you can do it, I have role models that do it too. When we develop that self-efficacy, again, it's our biggest predictor of whether we will be successful in our behavior. And we've done some research to demonstrate that this is just how it works. And so this was a study a while ago. Yes, we did this in 56 people, Dr. Little and I in my lab, and we had people randomized to engaging in high intensity interval training or moderate intensity continuous training. And all these numbers are just ways of saying that after we randomize people to the condition, we engage in 2 weeks of supervised exercise training with them in my lab. So just 2 weeks. And then we let them be, and we didn't do anything, contacting them again at 12 months after that 2-week intervention. And we asked them, how confident are you to engage in exercise when it's raining, when you're busy at work, when there's barriers out there? And they rated themselves, and then we measured how many minutes of moderate intensity and vigorous intensity they were engaging in. And what we found was the predictor is up at the top. That self-regulatory efficacy, or SRE, was a strong predictor of whether they did any minutes of physical activity or not. No matter what condition they were in, that efficacy was predicting what they did 1 year after the trial. So how do we do this? First, think about those mastery experiences you have had, whether they were 20 years ago or last year or last week. That is your reminder to yourself that you can do it. If you've done it in the past, you can do it again. The next thing we want to do is self-monitor. We want to be aware of those physiological cues that are happening, and we want to be aware of whether people are encouraging us verbally or whether we're looking around and seeing role models around us. And we also want to engage in imagery. And so remember, I was saying those vicarious experiences, when you're lying in bed and being like, I can't get up in the morning, I don't want to do it. Those are those visual activities you can do when you're about to fall asleep or in the middle of the day to remind yourself that actually you do have the ability to do it. Okay, so speaking of that self-monitoring piece, it is good for increasing our confidence to engage in exercise, but it's also really critical for another self-regulation aspect that I'm going to group tips 4, 5, and 6 together. So for self-monitoring, we want to do it because we want to know where we stand today. Don't wait till next month when things are better. We want to start self-monitoring right now, and we want to be honest with ourselves and acknowledge to ourselves where start point is today. Not where it was when we were a PE grad 20 years ago, not where it was 5 years ago. Our bodies change every day, so we want to start with today. And we want to make sure that we make it so convenient that it's a self-monitoring thing we can do every single day, right? So I love my daily journal. I have my morning AM journal right first thing I wake up. It's right there. And so it's a cue for me to act on self-monitoring. Some people use a phone, an app. Some people use verbal diary, or some people use calendars they put on their fridge. Whatever it is, make it work for you. Make it detailed, and just remember, it only works if you're honest. So it might be a check mark if you exercise that day, or an X if you don't. Or it might be writing down the number of minutes of your walk, and just tracking what that is each day. So we're going to self-monitor, and then the next step in that is reflection. So by self-reflection, what I want you to consider doing is taking a moment at the end of each week to understand what is working and what's not working. So if there is more X's on the calendar than check marks, or if you're striving, your ultimate goal is a 30-minute run, let's say, and the numbers aren't progressing past 10, we really need to start thinking and figuring out, okay, why is that happening? This usually occurs when thinking about, well, what's stopping me is because I don't have enough time. Do I not have enough support? Do I need a new pair of walking shoes? Whatever it might be, it is important for us to reflect, I would suggest, about the end of each week to recognize what's stopping you and what helps you. So I put in here how, and I put externalize. So remember I was talking about self-compassion. I'm writing yourself a letter as though you were writing it to your best friend. This is what is meant by externalization. So we need to step out of our own ourselves for a moment, and when reflecting back, which is why it's helpful to have a number of days in a row, we really need to think about, okay, if I was looking at somebody else's schedule, would I say to them, oh, the schedule's clearly working for you, you're doing great? Or would I say, okay, you have a goal and it's not quite meeting, you're not progressing, or what would you do, or what would you say? In a kind way, but also just acknowledging where you were at. Look for patterns. This piece I have in capitals here is just a friendly reminder, because I think it's important to remind that it's about the goal behavior, not the outcome, right? So it's about achieving what you can control, which is the behavior behind the goal, not a made up or some arbitrary number on a scale or a device of sorts. So the third tip that comes along here and brings it full circle is the modification. And I feel like this is the hardest part. So we've self-monitored daily, quick check-ins. The end of the week we've gone, okay, am I progressing on the right path here? Is there a pattern here? But the hard part is to then change that if it's not going the way you want it to go, right? So what's stopping you, or how am I gonna modify this current plan? I said that I was gonna walk every day after dinner and I'm not doing it yet. Do I need to root down harder, or do I need to not walk after dinner? Perhaps it's lunch, perhaps it's first thing in the morning. Finding and being courageous enough to try something else until you find the thing that works for you. And that modification cycle is by another fantastic Canadian psychologist, Dr. Bender. He was at U of A for a while. Anyways, so to modify, we have to create effective plans. And I often find it helpful to be honest and say, this is not working for me. It's not an insult to yourself to say, hey, this plan, okay, I started out here, that was my starting point. Now I need to modify because I didn't remember that, oh yeah, actually I'm really busy in the summer months. I have caregiving duties or what have you, and it's not gonna work. So it's not a quit everything, it is a modify the plan and refresh. If that's still not working, this is where you can seek credible help. And so, like I mentioned, within my lab, we offer one-on-one counseling for people who are at risk of type 2 diabetes. Well, there are great counselors within the Okanagan that I can help refer you to. It's actually the greatest self-investment, I think, when you can acknowledge, hey, I've done this for myself and this isn't working. Seeking healthcare professional advice can also be helpful. Okay, and this one, we're getting to tip number 7. This is maybe what I would argue is the hardest one of all, but really important to remember. So mindfulness allows us to cue in each moment, each day, and recognize the barriers and facilitators. So I would say there are a number of reasons, but I'm going to boil it down to understanding, being mindful helps us understand the cues that are serving us and ones that we need to throw away. Okay, so when those negative feelings, thoughts come in, if there is something that brings you thoughts of guilt or shame or not good enough, that's baggage that does not motivate us, that will hold us back, and we need to let that go. So anything or anyone that's saying, oh, you really should be doing this, probably not going to help you. So not that we want to throw that person away, but we need to walk away from that type of negative advice and move towards things that do help us, that facilitate our healthy behavior change. And we can only do that if we're really being mindful to our sensations of what's helping and what's not helping. And also just being mindful makes life more enjoyable. All right, so how do we do this? Being aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, observing, again, those physical sensations like, is my heart beating? Is my heart coming through my chest, up through my throat right now? Does that feel good? Okay, good. Then I can keep going with that. When do I need to stop? When do I need to proceed again? And then being in the moment. So allowing ourselves to recognize, hey, when I am exercising and I am getting into the flow, I kind of really enjoy that. And I'm going to stay in that moment for a bit. So celebrating every little step is important for us to do because it bolsters our self-efficacy. It bolsters that confidence. So we want to reinitiate those sensations of feel good. So reward yourself because it motivates and continues goal behavior. So when we have gone out for that walk, when we have done our first 20-minute walk up from 15 minutes, that's a time for you to acknowledge that, pat yourself on the back, and keep going. Do the check mark on the fridge. It's a little silly thing, but it does work. And this is important because it's a reminder that those long-term goals don't become achieved overnight. It's the behaviors are feeling increase those sensations of satisfaction because they take consistency, because it's not easy to do overnight. And that's why we should feel proud of ourselves, right? So we want to acknowledge each step, because every time we do that, that gives us a past performance accomplishment to say, oh yeah, I can do it, I can do it again. So I like to use the self-monitoring log as my little kudos or tap on the back step as well. So when I have my check marks, if I have those 5 check marks every week, that's my goal. 5 every work week, every work day, like to make sure that I get a little bit of exercise in. Then I know by the end of the week, then I can reward myself. And it might be something little like a tea or a coffee, or it might be whatever suits your fancy. So that's my built-in reward system, and I would encourage you to do that and avoid downplaying it. So if you say, oh, it's nothing, oh, whatever, then psychologically, it kind of gets that thought process in your head as well, but it is a big deal. And we only achieve those big deals if we have the consistency day in and day out. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand on this one, but if I did, I bet we would have another room full of hands up. So the comparison game is such a cruel one because not only is it demotivating, we know that it actually is useless, right? So we know that your genes aren't the same as the person sitting beside you's genes. We know that whatever you see on TV or social media is fake. And even though we know that, we still get into these comparison games that are absolutely not helpful to our long-term motivation. And that certainly applies when we're talking about exercise behavior. So instead, we want to not compare with anybody, including our past self who 10 years ago did a different thing or had a different shape of hips or knees. We want to ensure that we're comparing ourselves to how we're doing yesterday, what we did last week, okay? And we want to track our progress towards that behavior. The final tip I'm going to share with you is number 10, it's still important, and I do want to share with you some evidence that we did way back ago, a decade ago. We did 2 studies, and they were both about comparing what was the best time to engage in exercise for long-term adherence. So I've got 2 graphs up here, and I'll orient you because they're the same orientation. So we're looking at the frequency of exercise intentions for a week, and on the bottom we chunked the day into 3-hour blocks, 3-hour time blocks. So early morning, mid-morning, etc. And you see 2 colors here. The gray color is when the total number of exercise intentions people set for themselves in these specific time blocks, and the black is the number of exercise intention fails. So this would be, they said that they wanted to exercise between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. and they didn't do exercise at 5 to 8 a.m. So in study 1, which is on your left-hand side, we looked at 200 busy working adults, and we looked again at when did they plan to exercise and when did they not follow through with those exercises. And what you can see on the graph is that the later on in the day, the more fails that people had. What's heartbreaking too is that as the later in the day is, most people said, oh, I'm gonna exercise between 5 and 8 p.m. So like kind of that after work typical schedule, but that's where the most number of fails are. So then we redid the study, and this time we did it with 200 individuals who are university students here at UBC Okanagan, and same trend emerged in terms of fails. The later the day goes on, the more number of fails that these individuals have. So the moral of the story is if you're going to exercise, you're going to set some intentions to exercise, I would recommend doing it in the morning. And the reason why is because our ability to overcome all the challenges of the day, the likelihood that something goes wrong with the car, or all of a sudden you get called in, or a friend asks for a favor, all of those things build up throughout the day. you're least likely to have something interrupt your plans at, let's say, 5 in the morning than as compared to 5 p.m. at night. So it doesn't work for everyone, but we've found, and there's other literature I should have shown, that just demonstrates it's easier for people to schedule. So we can do this by planning ahead. Certainly it means, you know, sometimes some people like to set their alarm or set their exercise clothes out beside their bed or what have you, but doing it before your first morning coffee, whatever it works for, however it works best for you. Prioritizing your life goals around that. Okay, so those were the 10 strategies and tips. I didn't tell you were going to be tested, but you are going to be challenged a little bit here. For this fantastic next, you can confirm it's a pretty great bento box. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's got cutlery in there, made of bamboo. It's fully recyclable. Can anyone tell me what one of the tips is? I heard curious and I heard compassion. Okay, I'm going to do this. Maybe John can. Okay, perfect. And I have, and I heard compassion over here. Yep, here we go. Perfect. Okay, this next one we're going to do by raise hands. If somebody feels brave enough to explain one of the tips. Oh, yes. Oh, okay, sorry, hang on. Yes, it's coming here, Barbara.
The one I chose is do it in the morning.
Okay, what does that mean?
And the reason being is that you have more focus in the morning, and as the day goes on, distractions get in the way, and things get just diluted and diluted.
Exactly. See, Dr. Little, this is your next speaker for Diabetes Dialogue number 5. Excellent, thank you. Excellent, well done. Okay. Yes, I'm impressed. Thank you for your attention, I appreciate that. So I'm going to end it off there, since you clearly know this stuff. And I'll just say that if you or any of a friend or colleague you know in town, in the Okanagan region, is interested in our pre-diabetes program, these types of tips are what we provide in our one-on-one counseling, and that's the QR code for the program. And if you want to send anyone our way and they're not sure of their risk, we put some forms out in the foyer here assessing risk of type 2 diabetes. And with that, I will turn it over I'm happy to answer questions, but I think John's going to come up.